we go. Okay, hello everyone. Episode 2 of, I don't know, it may be fortune or folly that brings me in front of the screen. But I am so excited to have Carol Parker here today. She is running for the school board in Highland, Indiana, and I'm so excited. This is the first time that Carol and I have met, although we've passed each other like ships in the night at certain events, but this is the first time you and I are meeting, and I am so grateful for you agreeing to do this interview with me, because we really, ordinary people like us, really have an opportunity to talk to people who have the courage to stand up and put themselves forward, especially in politics. It's usually putting yourself forward to be shot down. So tell me a little bit about yourself and what it is that you're doing and what brought you to this place where you're now. Have you always been in politics?
No, I've never ran for office before, and thank you for having me into your home. I decided to run for school board in Highland because I really feel like the children need an advocate. And as things are going, parents are being disrespected at school board meetings, and the children's curriculum is such that it doesn't seem age appropriate often. So I think that my experience, 34 years teaching, writing, building curriculum with a multitude of teachers and professionals who were truly experts in the field, would give me the backdrop to look over our school district with eyes of, expertise.
Okay, I have a particular concern about the way that education is delivered, and just to give you a little bit about a little background on me. I have one child. I live in one town. She goes to a school in a completely different town, and the reason for that is, having been to a number of schools, I think the disconnect between what the schools are teaching and what the world requires these children to be equipped with, there's such a mismatch, and I wonder why. And I know that the school board is supposed to oversee the school, but I wonder how much. What is it explain to me what it is that you think the school board is supposed to do, and whether you feel they are actually doing it or have been doing it.
Well, the school board is elected by the community, first of all, and they represent the parents and other members to direct a school in producing children who can get a job, function, and contribute back to society. So, as one of the requisites is to okay the curriculum. And often, if the school board isn't paying close attention, curriculum gets through their fingers that is really inappropriate. And for example, we purviewed many of the mandatory reading materials in 8th grade, sophomore in high school, that were politically motivated and had hidden agendas about sexual activity, inappropriate language. The grammar isn't even appropriate or correct. So I think that the school board can take a role in making sure that that curriculum is watched over.
And who do you, the actual school board, can anyone run for school board, or do they have to have certain expertise, or just whoever's interested?
Anyone, if you're 18 or over, you can run for the school board as long as you are a citizen in that community. By the way, school board members don't have a background check, so that's something that I would, on day one, recommend that we all are background checked. They're not drug tested as they drug test children in the school. And often, I know for a fact that there's school boards that haven't seen all of their buildings or gone through to peruse to see the ambiance or the safety of the buildings that they're overseeing. So that's definitely something I would do at the very beginning, should I be elected to serve our community.
So this is news to me, that you are entrusted with the education and upbringing, and on a more macro level, the a competent workforce, but you could have goodness knows what in your background. You could be a drug addict, and you're expected to produce a competent, globally competitive workforce. And we all know that the education standards in this country are so far below international standards that I'm shocked. I honestly, I'm truly shocked to hear this.
Well, we have in Highland the test results in our school in the math, science, reading, 30 percentile. As an educator in Illinois in science, I can say that the curriculums that we put together, the students ranked in the 90 percentile all the time. And we understand COVID played a role in that, but that's a huge difference and loss of learning. So I think that we need to, work on this in a way that the teachers and the administrators sit down and hunker down and come up with solutions. The school board does hire a superintendent who is the CEO of the school. In webinars with the State Board of Education that I've attended, we as school board members have been prompted to stay out of the CEO to not undermine the administrators. But in the same token, there's a difference between, undermining and paying close attention to who you're overseeing. I'm not quite sure that that's always done.
All right, forgive me, but a CEO of any company whose productivity was only at 30% would be fired. Does the school board have the power to fire a superintendent whose track record is as poor as that?
The Indiana State Board of Education would tell you that that is the major role of a school board, is to hire or fire a superintendent. And I'm not leaning toward one or the other. You can't go into a situation predetermining what should happen. You have to get the facts. And anybody knows if you're a leader, don't walk in there with some ideas that you're going to be doing this, that, and the other. No, the first thing is get the facts. And make sure that whatever you're saying to the people before you get elected, that your word is your honor. That you're not just going to go in there roguely. There are laws and people have opportunities, and that goes with all the teachers and etc.
I hear this in positions of power these days. There appears to be very little honor amongst our leaders these days, in that nobody falls on the sword anymore. If you take on, for example, a politician whose underlings have done something that has completely destroyed a department, say the Department of Education, they can get away with saying, well, look, there's so much, there are so many things that we had to deal with, and I can't, control X number of people, but you what else are you there for other than to take accountability? As far as I'm aware, the superintendent gets paid and gets paid mightily, as though he or she is the CEO of a big corporation, and yet that person is not expected to take accountability for failures such as 30 percentile achievement rate. I mean, how long have these? I appreciate COVID has had an impact on school performance, but something tells me that isn't all that unusual. Like pre-COVID, what were your success rates?
Well, I think that ethics in policy setting in schools is ultimately one of the most important things that a school board can represent for its community. And this takes place in ideas like respecting all of the community members in a way that a parent can come to a school board meeting, be heard when they're advocating for their child, and actually get a result that they were heard. So when you see school board members turning their back on the community or just diminishing somebody else's ideas for their children, it really is heartbreaking and it's really unethical. So I would say, the superintendent is held accountable to set that tone in the building and would be required to have ethics. I can honestly tell you that when I taught for 34 years, kids would ask, who are you voting for? Or politically inquire about my opinions, and they never got them. Because in America, your vote is your own business, and your politics stays with you. Children should give opinions, but they're not my opinions, and they're all welcome. And I taught children who came from all over the world, every country you can imagine. I know because they came out and they would point to their countries on a map in our classroom so that we could hear about their culture too. But in the same token, all those kids stood for the Pledge of Allegiance to America, whether they were American or not. And those children in my classes, they felt that they were honored to say the Pledge of Allegiance, and they respected our America always. And its history, rich history.
No, that's super. I mean, I think it's the height of hubris for any educational institution to move on to such topics as politics, sexuality, opinion, rather than the basic facts of life, given that you are so far below other countries, and we are now in a global market. We are fighting for global dominance, and our children are being left to talk about, consider things like their pronouns. When I'm shocked at this figure that you just gave us about, our children are achieving, what was that? What, the 30th percentile in what? What was that? Was that maths or English?
Yes. I mean, all this data is available, and parents should be aware on the school website. It's their test scores for the school. It gives all the ratings on discipline, populations, anything you could possibly want. So there's other areas, and our school district does very well in terms of order and rules in their schools and enforcing rules. So there is a demise in the progress across our country. It's not unique to Highland, it's in many districts. And it does need to be addressed, and it would be my priority to focus on the core curriculum of the school and really to make sure that teachers who want their rooms functional and rules enforced, that they're supported so that they're able to teach. Because you have to keep in mind that anyone can go to the public school. We accept all. And with that, it's important that we do make sure that we are held to high standards in behavior in the school for all children.
Thank you for that. I did want to speak to you about behavior and how it impacts a teacher's ability to teach a child and teach all of the children in that classroom. Because as you say, these children come from all sorts of backgrounds, and we now also have, 2 years of essentially, no direction, no coordination, no real care and discipline, the kind of discipline that you might expect in a classroom. These children are coming out of maybe a year, sometimes 2 years of Zoom lessons where we all know what the reality is. Parents now know the reality of what goes on, or what kind of teaching, or rather lack of teaching there has been.
Content.
So yeah, exactly, the lack of content, but not just that. When we go to school to learn other things, not just what's in a book, but we go to school to socialize. We go to school and we learn to respect hierarchy and our elders and our teacher, because the teacher is ultimately the person who has to
be trusted.
And when the teacher says no, no means no. What do you think we can do? Because guaranteed, I believe that behavior is going to be a real issue, because behavior is what is the thing that is the barrier between the teacher and a student that's actually learning.
Well, to be clear, there are rules and standards for order in the classroom, discipline with dignity. There are programs that teach exactly what is necessary, and really the first step is letting and educating all the students and the community about the rules of the school. I mean, in order to enforce something, everybody has to be aware of what's expected. So just making those rules known is the first step. And after that, you have to mean what you say. So if I tell you that this is our rule and I let you continually go against that rule, I've just undermined the whole system, you know.
Can I ask you, how much of the some might call it politically correct, others might call it this desire to be inclusive of communities that may have suffered as a consequence of years of really just lack of care, lack of investment, lack of consideration, how much of your ability to mete out discipline is going to be affected by political quote unquote considerations about the kinds of discipline that you can mete out to certain community groups?
Well, I can only speak for my point of view on this, but rules are rules. If I'm playing a sport, it doesn't matter your economic backdrop, your color. We're playing pickleball, those are the lines, this is the call, and it's equal for everybody. Even people who may have a lesser income want to be treated equally as others. They don't want any step up. They really do feel that they can achieve as anyone else can with the same rules. And I feel that's an important thing for people's growth.
So would you be against the kind of, people call it equity, where we're dumbing down our standards to accommodate certain communities that may have suffered from, poor education? So, for example, if certain communities can't come up to the level of a C grade, well, we're not going to expect much more, because it's not fair that they should be quote unquote discriminated against. Everyone gets dumbed down to the maximum grade can only ever be a C. That sort of thing.
Well, I would answer that this way. I would ask anybody who needs a lawyer or a doctor, a dentist or plumber, do they want the plumber that graduated on a D or C average, or do they want the plumber who had the A or B? Lawyer, doctor. Well, I'm telling you, I want high standards for the people who are gonna, service our community, because I don't want to have failures in our society. So we want our best step forward. And when I played on sports, I didn't always play. I was sitting on the bench as a volleyball player because the person was out there, they did a better job. And I always had the opportunity to step up, work harder, and take that place too. And that's how I feel about our schools and our education and even our society. We all have opportunities, but nobody gets to call who's going to win or lose. That's kind of playing the game. And it's not being a fair referee either.
Okay, that's great. The next question for me is, given that we know COVID universally has impacted children and standards, this may be a question for the state, not necessarily a local school board, but what are we going to do about those 2 years of loss of learning? Is there any... I always wondered why we didn't have summer schools to make up for some of that learning loss.
What a good question.
What are we doing to compensate for that, for those 2 years where the children were not in school and they weren't learning really? Because we cannot graduate 18-year-olds who only have a 16-year-old education, or vice versa.
Well, one thing we learned was that education through technology solely is not the answer. The children need to get their hands on the books, they need to get their hands in lessons, they need direct teaching, and they require a school atmosphere to be successful based on what we saw as a result of 2020, 21. And teachers are frontline workers. Now think about that. We as firemen and policemen to go out and risk their lives, and if they didn't, we would be in big trouble. And so what's the difference?
There is no difference, and I thank you so much for saying that, teachers are like any other life-saving professions, because I can tell you, I would not be here today doing what I'm doing, living where I'm living the life that I'm living, if it wasn't for my teachers. I could have gone, but anything could have happened to me. I'm not from a privileged background, but I can tell you, I've walked in the halls of privilege because of my teachers. I owe everything to my teachers. Children get one opportunity, and that is the years that they spend in school with either an extraordinary human being that's going to really just make this child blossom and fly, or utterly crush them. And I don't know that anyone would accept a surgeon to turn up to an operating theatre and do a mediocre job, because they also save lives. Teachers make or break lives, and we should see them that way. We should look at them and the quality of their lives. People keep talking about throwing money at teachers, but having been a substitute, they don't get paid enough for what they do. Absolutely, they don't. But also, we don't think about the quality of their lives. What's the quality of the human being that's coming into that classroom and trying to save these children from themselves?
Well, on the other hand, as important as teachers are, I can tell you that you sort of knew the GPA of a classroom based on the number of parents that would show up for open house. That parents who send their kids with values and ethics and just a respect for the educational field makes a huge difference in the lives of that child at school. And the parents really need to step up, and they also need to be respected by the school for their input and their advocating. They're advocating for their children.
Yeah, I have to tell you, I'm really heartened to see all of these videos of parents turning up to school board meetings, expressing their frustration, their anger, and their pain, really, at watching how their children are being treated or not, and how they are being treated by the school board. Now, the only thing is, I think the reason that most people parents have been asleep on the job is because the realities of life out there, the fact that both parents now work extraordinarily long hours, and they themselves aren't looking after their children, somebody else is, maybe the grandparents are. So I'm wondering, we elect you, we delegate that responsibility to you, the school board members. How do we, other than to vote you out, how would you suggest we,
resolve the communication between the parents, the schools, the administration? Like, there needs to be a step in between parents being frustrated, showing up at a meeting and not even sure what's going to be the outcome of the meeting. And maybe those are discussions that should be had with the school board and the administration about roundtables that involve the community. Because not only the parents, but what about the people like B, myself, who I don't have a child in that school. I just have a backdrop that I can lend expertise to this board. But there are parents who are chemists, they are therapists who can come in and provide backdrop on how their vocations use the practical applications of what the students are learning, and talk about job requisites and contribute in many ways that the teachers could use that outside help for a perspective. So, we need to open the door to the community, not close the door.
This was another thing that I wanted to talk to you about, the almost institution-like feeling that we get from some of these schools, that your parents, you are out there. Once you hand those children to us, the children are ours. And that's the strangest, most bizarre experience I've ever had, especially in an age where really even the teachers don't seem to have control of what they teach and what they don't teach. It's all coming from top down. How can we open those doors up? Like, how would you suggest we get more dialogue and equal parity between parents and teachers, insofar as both parent and teacher should have a say over this child?
Well,
they are our children, not yours.
Well, if the school doesn't ask, or the parents don't ask, nothing will change. We have met in Highland, we as community members with the administration, we've asked them to survey the parents regarding, for example, their grading system and how user-friendly it is, how often they might use it, just for the school to get feedback. And in that line, the school could ask questions about the procedures in the school that the parents would like to see changed, or input for whatever the parents might be able to contribute. Invite them to have the roundtables as we had talked about, and make it a productive, respectful conversation, not just one-sided. We're going to tell you, or the other one's going to tell the other, but that's what a true dialogue is. We're really growing from each other.
Yeah, so that forum does not exist currently, but that's something that if you were to be elected to the board, that's something that you would recommend?
I would certainly recommend that. And in some forms, it may be happening now. As I told you to start with, we've got to get the facts. You know, I've never ran for a school board. Getting into the school board and getting all the facts of what's going on at the school before you make decisions. But I can tell you it will be looked into, and that would be the goal. The communication is the highest standard between the community and the school.
In terms of communication, how is communication at the moment? How does a parent get hold of what the minutes of a meeting of a school? But do we? Is it just we have to go searching for it, or
yes?
Does it get posted to parents, or
on the school website is the school board site, and all the meetings, all the past minutes, they're all listed there for you. I would say that the school sends out a vast majority of all kinds of information through texting, through emails to the parents. Sometimes the parents are inundated with all kinds of information, almost overload, not just in our school district, but many across the country. My daughter says so in Des Moines, Iowa. She's like, oh my gosh, we just get them all the time. But they seem to be one way. So it's good to be informed. It's great the schools are doing that, but it also has to be opened up from the parents back to the schools.
Do you think there's also a cultural shift that needs to happen amongst families, amongst parents, that, you say that it's great that some of these parents are now turning up to these school boards, but I grew up, and I think my parents would also say that teachers were so highly respected and valued that we never questioned. We never questioned what the teachers were doing, what the school was doing, what they were imparting to their children. Do you think we just have to now have a complete shift in mindset, and to say that, well, you shouldn't be so complacent. You should question. It's your duty as a parent to question, to look into. If that's just part of parenting. Because I know growing up, my parents, they didn't exist. My schooling was literally me going to school and the teacher. My parents did not exist in that equation at all. And I didn't have to.
Well, what's changed is technology. So now the child, and when you talk about safety, the telephone or phone is not a phone, it's a computer that opens the child up to the whole world. And it's not really monitored all the time, especially at school. So I would say to you that because of the changes of what children can access, children have to pay more attention to a bigger picture. That was not the case in a small community where the teacher lived down the block, or the parents all got together and they really communicated a lot. Now a lot of people do work, and their life is full of other ideas that our parents had a whole nother backdrop. So I would say it's just imperative that parents pay attention, not only at school, but even with the kids' friends, the families, engage in your neighborhood. It's people should be motivated to pay attention.
Could I also ask a question about computers and technology in school? It's really interesting. Just the other day, a group of parents that I know were expressing the concern that we have these Chromebooks, and every child has one in school, as though it were a great boon and benefit.
Yeah.
But I'm finding that these are being used as a crutch by both teachers and students, and as a diversion by students. And I wonder when it is that we are going to go back to the old-fashioned, or at least a combination of technology and old-fashioned teacher standing up in front of a class and actually teaching to the child, and not expecting the child to teach themselves via this online app.
Well,
Because,
what you're asking, let's go back to the report card that schools are getting, because tablets and all of this technology was really relied upon a lot. Look at the result we got. I think it answers the question. So we do need to go back and rethink how much technology versus actual interactions with the child, paper, pencil. It used to be, as a science teacher, when I would meet you at a parent conference, I would hand you a portfolio of your child's work. So you saw exactly what they've been doing, not answering questions on a ditto, but I mean verbatim. And you could see if they could graph how their labs were written up, etc. Now, the parent gets a grade that is sent, on a report online. They don't see the assignment, they don't see the questions they got wrong. The kid can go back and say, can I see my test so I can see the ones I got wrong and change it? No, you cannot. These are things that I find very concerning, because it's the questions that are asked about a book that tell the most about what's being taught. And when you don't see them, it's a big piece missing for the parents and the child.
Carol, I cannot stress enough, if there is one thing and one thing only that you managed to achieve, I wish you all the best of luck with this election, but if once you are elected, you could institute that change, reducing our reliance on technology in classrooms. You would go down in history, because our children are going down in history alongside this technology, which is crushing their ability to use their minds and our ability to monitor that. So I thank you so much for coming today. I wish you the very best of luck. I'm so excited to meet somebody who had the courage to do it. Lots of us just sit back and watch others not even necessarily work for this position, but just assume it's their right to be in that position all the time. And that's why we get people who are entitled and lacking in imagination and oomph to make changes. So good luck to you.
Well, there's a lot of great kids out there.
Oh, yes.
A lot of great kids, and you probably have one of them yourself.
Oh, yes.
And so I want to thank you for taking the time.
And there's just so much more that I want to talk to you about, but we are short on time. I'm going to see what comes of this interview. I hope lots of people watch and get to know you. Look out for Carol Parker on your ballot, and please tick Carol Parker for school board in Highland, Indiana. Thank you so much for tuning in today. Thanks. Bye-bye.